Having outlined the topic of economic justice and look at a utilitarian approach to distributive justice, we're now going to turn to a different theory, Nozick's theory, which is a libertarian theory, also called entitlement theory. Okay, let's get into it. As the title of Libertarian Approach suggests, it focuses on the idea of liberty, or allowing people the freedom to live as they want to without being coerced or forced into things by others. And those others would include the government. That means that this theory sees government having a very small role. For instance, upholding the rule of law, etc., protecting society through national defence, policing, some limited regulation where we have perhaps market failures. This libertarian approach fundamentally recognises and emphasises the rights of individuals to life, liberty and property identified by Locke. Now, this theory does focus a lot on property, and it's important to conceptually understand why, when the emphasis is on liberty, is there so much emphasis on property. And one of the ideas that the thinkers have around this concept is that without the right to hold property, without your right to own things, you can't actually have freedom. So if you can't build up a store of resources or wealth, then you're totally reliant on others and what they will give you or not give you, or what the government will allow you to do. So that actually your right to own things and to have wealth is really fundamental, like a cornerstone to your freedom. Without that, you will kind of be reliant on others and can be coerced by others. So that's why there's such an emphasis on the role of property in these kinds of approaches and systems. So Nozick's entitlement theory basically suggests that everyone is entitled to goods and property that they've acquired fairly. So this is really important. You have to have acquired it fairly. So that means no one else's freedom has been violated. No one has been coerced, and everything that's come about is the result of free and open decision making. As long as property has been acquired according to Nozick's two principles, then the distribution of property is just, even if it's unequal. So it's just irrespective of the outcome, because people have freely entered into these exchanges. So what are Nozick's two key principles? Well, the first one is original acquisition, and it basically says any property you acquire by making it, either by yourself or obtaining it from the unowned wilderness. This goes back in time a bit, right, when there was unowned wilderness. But imagine you could go out into the forest and get a tree, and you could chop that tree down and no one owned it, and you made a table. Then you've justly acquired that table because it's come from your own work. Now, you might think that's a bit far-fetched, but things today are a bit like that, only we don't make physical things. We often come up with ideas, with code, for computer programs, with business ideas, and provided we've made them ourselves, we're entitled to that. It's part of that original acquisition idea. Now, the second principle is that you're entitled to any property that you acquire from someone else legitimately. Okay. That's by voluntary exchange, purchase, or gift. Note here, you can't get something by stealing it, lying or fraud, or forcing, coercion, or forcing people to give it to you. If it's one of those elements, then there's no voluntary exchange. But provided it's free of theft, fraud, and coercion, if you've got it through some kind of free exchange, then the property has been justly acquired. And then all we do is repeatedly apply those principles. That means that if you buy property legitimately from a thief, that property is not justly acquired. It's unjustly acquired, and you wouldn't be entitled to it. And that's a fundamental point. Your entitlement is limited to those things you create, or those which through a chain of ownership, right, have been justly acquired by everyone down the chain. And here's a fairly simple example. So Alan buys a desk from Betty, who purchased it from Chuck, who purchased it from Diane, who made it herself from driftwood that she found on the beach. In that instance, Alan is entitled to the desk. Now, if instead Diane didn't make it herself from driftwood, but if she had stolen the wood, Alan wouldn't be entitled to it. Even though he did exchange it from Betty, the chain has been broken here where Diane actually stole the wood. Same thing as if Chuck had stolen the desk here in our chain. So what we're seeing is we need to see a clear chain from the originator, which is Diane, who made it, and she got the wood. Okay, she finds the wood, so she's entitled to use it. Then the transfer to Chuck is valid, provided Chuck exchanges it. Chuck to Betty, Betty to Alan. Okay, so the end entitlement depends on each link in the chain here. To get a little bit better insight into that, why don't we look at a famous example that Nozick used, only we might update it a little bit for where we're at in 2019. We'll do that in the next podcast.